All right, what's up, everybody? Coach Ben, podcast 40 something. I'm here with Jim from Jiu-Jitsu Magazine. We're at my academy, School of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Arcadia, California. What's up, Jim?
Man, the weather is beautiful in lovely Southern California. I will start off with that. And we just saw a representative of Jiu-Jitsu have a phenomenal fight over the weekend, Brian T. City Ortega.
Yes, didn't use an ounce of Jiu-Jitsu.
Didn't use an ounce of Jiu-Jitsu, but what would you say his base is?
It's Jiu-Jitsu.
He comes from Jiu-Jitsu, baby, which brings up the question. Is Jiu-Jitsu a good base? Is it the best base for MMA? What are your thoughts, Coach?
I know that you have a slightly different opinion, but I will just say, to answer the question, is Jiu-Jitsu a good base for MMA? My answer is, at this point in time, modern MMA, no. It is not a good base. And I'm saying
well, let's
base.
say the best base, right?
It's definitely not the best.
Okay.
Is it an acceptable base? Yes. Is it a good base? It's not. What is the definition of good here? Are we comparing good to Tai Chi, or are we comparing good? And Tai Chi is very legit. It's just not a fighting. Not really.
Yeah, I was going to say,
art.
shame on you, not Jiu-Jitsu.
For MMA. For
Okay.
MMA. So for my thoughts.
Explain yourself.
My thoughts on this, Jim, and you give me your thoughts too, is that Jiu-Jitsu maybe 20 years ago, when there were less complete mixed martial artists, Jiu-Jitsu could be a good base, because if the fight somehow hit the ground, you basically won the fight. Hoist Gracie did this. But modern MMA, no. And the reason is because we're in my jiu-jitsu academy. I run a jiu-jitsu class. I would say that if I were to train an MMA athlete from ground zero with no grappling, and had his jiu-jitsu, had his base be jiu-jitsu, I could develop a system that would make jiu-jitsu a good base. But to be honest, it would be focused on a lot of the skills that you would see in wrestling, and the skills that you would almost naturally acquire through wrestling, but without some of the weaknesses that wrestling might give you, dangers with chokes and things like that, and certain postures that might leave you open for like knees and things like that. But yeah, I think, to answer your question straight up, no, it is not right now a terribly good base for MMA. It is a decent one. Okay, I'm not going to say it's bad, but the reason I say this is because you can tell, right? I watch basically every fight. I watch most jiu-jitsu matches, and I sports bet, so I have to watch every fight. I have to do research. I have to take notes, and when you see a pure grappler, like a jiu-jitsu athlete, a wrestler, or judo, or sambo, go into MMA, right? You often see, especially with pure jiu-jitsu and pure judo athletes, they're missing one element of the game. And that element is the ability to take the fight to the ground, right? And I'm not talking about clinching up with somebody and hopping on their back. That is not the same thing. That is a way for, grappling to occur, but that is not what I'm talking about. And then the other thing is judo, right? So judo, we saw some examples of this. There was a woman that fought last week, Stephanie Egger. We talked about her, I think, and she's a great judo athlete. She's a under 23 Olympian or something like that, and she fought Tracy Cortez, who was a wrestler. So right there, we saw a person who had a wrestling base take on somebody with a judo base, and we're not talking about a low level judo person. And Tracy Cortez isn't exactly known as a very high level wrestler. Stephanie Egger is a high level judo player, and basically, Tracy, the wrestler, demolished, the judo player, Stephanie. It was just, there's certain things that wrestling gives you, that we talked about this before the show, that we don't have in judo or jiu-jitsu, and it's one is the ability to stand up, right? We talked about this last week. Mm-hmm. What happens in wrestling that most of the time doesn't happen in judo or jiu-jitsu, Sambo, I don't know too much about, so I'm just going to kind of keep that one on the edge. When I take you down in a wrestling match, right, freestyle, folk style, doesn't matter. You're not going to accept it. You're going to pop up and immediately scramble to avoid me scoring more points on you, getting behind you, putting a big throw on you. You're going to avoid me basically controlling you, right?
Yeah, and we talked about this before we got started. Like you mentioned, you would actually roll stomach down on the mat, pancake, and I like the way you put it, build back up to your feet.
Yeah. When do you ever do that in jiu-jitsu?
No. We're on the ground. This is where we go.
Right. If we're on the ground. So one of the issues in MMA, I see this with jiu-jitsu fighters a lot, is when they get to the guard, for example, they're content in the guard. In MMA, you're losing in the guard. In the guard, any guard, in my opinion, unless you have the person in a triangle.
You're talking about the bottom.
Yeah, the bottom. The person on the bottom. You're losing.
Ironically. And then, I mean, if you're really nice with your guard game, it's actually a better position, right?
Yeah, the last time I've ever seen somebody win from the bottom legitimately, like point scoring wise, it was a robbery too. It was Boss Rutan and Kevin Randleman. It was a robbery. I think Kevin Randleman got robbed. But and then also Tony Ferguson and Kevin Lee. Tony was doing massive damage.
Yeah. And actually,
Kenny Florian.
Of all people, Connor. He's busted people up inside of his guard. Like he's been able to, throw elbows, and I think people tend to forget.
So he's also taken damage, though.
Yeah,
so
for sure. But I'm talking about stanzas.
Lost.
I'm talking about stanzas where the idea of it is people forget about the power of the guard.
Yeah.
And no, you can inflict damage, but a lot of people don't. And to your point,
the judging criteria, though.
Yes. If you spend too much time there, and if you're not inflicting that kind of bloodletting damage.
If I'm in your guard and I throw, let's assume the referee doesn't stand us up. We're fighting. I'm taking you down. We're in close guard, and I throw maybe 3 strikes every 10 seconds. There's very few strikes. I just throw a couple strikes, every 10 seconds. I'll accumulate these strikes. Those are strikes. Those count as strikes. You hitting me, unless
it's not a 1-to-1 ratio for scoring.
No, not to mention, yes, scoring is significant, and plus I can deal significant strikes. I don't think you can deal significant strikes from the bottom unless it's an up kick.
Yeah, or you engage the core. I mean, I think you can. I mean, not knockout blows.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it before. Like we see, Nico Price knocked out Randy Brown with a hammer fist from the bottom. It's so rare that's considered one of the greatest knockouts of all time.
Yeah.
So anyway, to get back to our point about whether or not jiu-jitsu is a good base for MMA, it can be. But I can tell you right now that if you train traditional sport jiu-jitsu or jiu-jitsu for self-defense and you don't focus on specific things relating to MMA, like wall walking, like a cage, and we went over this in
shout out to last week's episode.
Great detail last week. Get the F up off the ground. You can, unless you have Ryan Hall level guard, you have crazy leg locks. Even people with crazy leg locks, you see in MMA, when you get punched in the face, it's a different game. So,
so back to wrestling.
Gotta get up.
Yeah.
And what sport emphasizes that? I've only wrestled for like 8 months or something like that, when in high school. So I don't know much, but I remember 2 things about wrestling: running like 18 miles before practice, every single practice, and being completely burnt out. And the second thing was we practiced scrambling a lot. We just got up. Nobody ever was on their back. We just don't. It was, if you're on your back, you're doing a Granby. It's like we prioritize the scramble and also getting back to the feet and into attacking positions. That's what I remembered from my limited wrestling, and from what I see of wrestling, that's it's just something that judo, jiu-jitsu doesn't have.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said of the philosophy and the mentality of the wrestling culture. And let me ask you, as a strength and conditioning coach, are the conditioning programs for a jiu-jitsu match and a wrestling match the same?
They're going to be different.
They're going to be different, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess with the same goal, of course, you want limitless to
wrestlers are a lot more athletic, meaning that
more explosion, right?
Yeah, I mean everything is on the feet. So what's the first thing you do when you why is it that the first thing you do is you take somebody to the ground? You take away their explosiveness and their pop, their ability to create kinetic energy. So So anyway, wrestling to me is probably the best base still, and this is nothing new. We've kind of established this, but I think over the course of time, there is not going to be a perfect or best base. There's going to be the base is going to be MMA.
Yeah, like 20 years from now, what does the landscape look like, right?
20
years.
Like pure wrestlers, like Khabib, for example. Khabib's fighting.
There you go, great example.
He has had to evolve his wrestling and his striking and really become a more complete athlete. He did. His wrestling was his base, right? Obviously, but he did judo. He also did like jiu-jitsu tournaments. He did nagas. There's footage of him doing naga tournaments, and what makes him so dominant? Why is he the GOAT? Why is he the pound for pound person? Well, one is he can. The second part of this is jiu-jitsu fighters can't really dictate where the fight goes, except for that one situation where in MMA, we get to the body lock and we try to jump on your back. Renzo Gracie, Yuki Kondo. Look up that match if you want to see a great, no wrestling, just jump to the back, do the leg hook takedown from the back, ba-boom, the choke's on, you're done. So yeah, I think in the future, jiu-jitsu is going to have to change if it wants to be a good base for MMA. There's obviously, other things too, like the gi and things like that. But the things I wanted to talk about mainly were the positions. Firstly is the position, and then secondly the ability to dictate where the fight goes. Right? Jiu-jitsu athletes cannot really dictate. Judo athletes, to a certain degree, can't dictate that either because there's no gi. All their throws, you can't kazushi or off balance somebody as easily without the gi. Think about in MMA, right? I know we're specifically talking about jiu-jitsu, but let's cover judo too as a good base. How many fighters do you know that actually use judo? Or how many high-level fighters do you know that have judo base?
Yeah, very few. I mean, you have Carl Parisian, Ronda, and then what's his name? He was a finalist that Nate Diaz beat in the tough finale back in the
Manny
day.
Gambarian.
Manny Gambarian, yeah.
Okay. So these are
very select.
Yeah, very select. There's a guy that I always mention. His name is Natan Schultz.
Remco Pardue.
I've never seen him fight.
UFC
it's a long time ago.
UFC 2, yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Right.
Look up a guy named Natan Schultz. He fights at PFL's Bankrupt, I think. So we might see him in another. I think he's in Bellator, actually. Look him up. He hits some of the nicest. I believe they're Haragoshis. They're either Tayatoshis or they're probably a Haragoshi because he probably has the hip in there. So, I mean, these are like outliers,
Right.
These are like outliers, and for the most part, he's using wrestling. He's using wrestling, but his base is judo. The best guys in jiu-jitsu that have made the transfer to MMA, the best jiu-jitsu guys, they're very high-level jiu-jitsu, but they're using wrestling to kind of unlock their jiu-jitsu. So Damian Maia is the best example, right? Damian Maia. This guy's a wrestler, Let's be honest. At the last 10 Damian Maia fights, he just shoots that single leg and he's taking you down. He's wrestling. He's dictating where the fight goes. Then he unlocks his jiu-jitsu.
I don't know. I would contest that a little bit because what he also likes to do is like baseball slide in and use a half guard as his takedowns.
Yes.
It's a very unique.
It is a unique way, but okay, so then he did it in reverse.
That's very jiu-jitsu,
Then he did it in reverse. He used his jiu-jitsu to enter his wrestling, and then he finished with jiu-jitsu. Because what he does is he gets into that underhook position to wrestle you, to single leg you, right? That's what he's doing.
No. He baseball slides. He'll grab legs, or I guess he'll initiate the clinch. And then he's
not
drop
on his
straight
back,
down.
He's not sitting back to a full like guard situation, right? He's kind of
he's on his side.
He's
it's
on
like
his side.
A deep half.
It's
a deep
the
half.
dog fight position is what they call it. I think. And he's trying to. He gets up, but anyway, at that point, right? I mean, you can call that jiu-jitsu. It probably is to a certain degree. It is, but I think that even if you ask Damian himself, he'll tell you that
I was going to say, ask Damien himself. He'll say jiu-jitsu.
No, he wouldn't. I've heard interviews with him saying this, and he'll say that he's kind of taken down his jiu-jitsu training and is focused most of his time on wrestling.
Oh, okay.
And so he's just one example, right? Mm-hmm. Another good example is so somebody that uses jiu-jitsu as their base, but they're really using wrestling. Is Lovato. Rafael Lovato. He's actually great example of what you said. When he beat Mousasi, he couldn't really straight up wrestle Mousasi, so he entered into wrestling positions from that slide in, from that baseball slide into the underhook. And then he would just do that, like the I think they call it like the old school sweep or something. The one
from
the half guard.
Yeah.
He hit like 4 of those on Mousasi, won the fight. But he's not doing like a traditional jiu-jitsu, right? Like jump in to pull close guard and then you throw up the triangle,
right.
Or you just like do like the the Gracie stomp and then you hug them and then you guys are
body fold
rolling
takedown
on the ground. Mm-hmm. Damian Maia's using single legs. He's using collegiate wrestling or freestyle wrestling moves. Lovato's using basically a scramble. He's using a scramble wrestling to initiate to unlock his jiu-jitsu. Then when he's on top, it's all jiu-jitsu. It's all jiu-jitsu. It's not wrestling anymore. He's not trying to pin. He's trying to submit. Mm-hmm. Right. So the two things: being able to get up off the ground, being able to dictate where the fight goes. Those are the two weaknesses I see in jiu-jitsu. The one strength that jiu-jitsu has for MMA, a lot of times it just doesn't. You don't get to realize. You don't get to unlock that strength because you can't dictate where the fight goes. Right. So if I have the greatest rear naked choke in the world, let's just say I do, mm-hmm. right? But I can't, expose your back.
Got to get there.
Mm-hmm. In a more simplistic way to think about it, I have the greatest, as soon as we hit the ground and we're committed to the ground, I'm the greatest grappler in the world. But if I can't get there, I mean, a bum could beat me,
Right.
It doesn't matter.
What good is it?
What good does it do? So anyway, practical things that you can take from this, and this is kind of what I'm doing at my academy. You've been training with me a little bit. I'm telling all my MMA fighters that I work with, especially the strikers, we don't even work like, complicated sequences of jiu-jitsu anymore. Mm.
Actually, I think that's a key right there. Complicated mm-hmm. sequences of jiu-jitsu. I think, again, going back to the mentality of wrestling, and we mentioned this before we got started, wrestling's a lot of broad stroke, not discounting the technique, but there's less things to focus on.
Right.
Whereas with jiu-jitsu, it's so complicated. Let's be real. I mean, sure, you have basics, but the deeper you go into the woods, it gets so complicated.
There's more intricacy, I think. You can brute a few wrestling things. You could brute, a couple, but try to, brute, a leg lock game.
Yeah.
It takes intelligence. You have to have preciseness. You have to drill these. You mm-hmm. understand how to control. There's just more elements. I'm not saying it's easier or harder or better or worse. It's just
there's a lot more.
Yeah, and at the same time, we need to also see we need to play a little devil's advocate and make sure that we're not seeing some blind spots in our own views.
Absolutely.
Wrestlers are generally better athletes, right? We've established this. So when
broad stroke people,
generally,
he said generally.
Generally, I mean, mm-hmm. most people would agree with that. I think.
All right.
Go to any college wrestling room and then go to show up at advanced class on a Tuesday night and tell me which room has better athletes.
Yeah,
just tell me. Just go. Don't even go to a D1. Go to your community college wrestling room. Yeah. Those guys are pretty good athletes, man. Those guys they're doing cartwheels and handstand flips and shit.
Man.
If I tried that in my jiu-jitsu class, we would all be in the hospital, including me.
Well, didn't Ben Askren call out the jiu-jitsu community for that?
Laziness.
He's like, dude, what are you guys doing? The way jiu-jitsu, a typical jiu-jitsu class.
The way it's trained, yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, you could argue that wrestling builds athleticism and jiu-jitsu, it builds athleticism too, but not to the same degree. So devil's advocate, you could say, is that what if we took all the great athletes in wrestling, and we started them with jiu-jitsu instead, and we took all the people with jiu-jitsu and we started them wrestling, would you have the same result? Well, I don't know. Who knows? But the likelihood is that scenario can't happen, because the wrestlers that are in the room that survived, the training, they're already cream of the crop. They've kind of survived. They've survived through high school into college, and now they're still in the sport. Maybe they wrestled as a kid. Jiu-jitsu is not the same. There's no, you don't get weeded out most of the time. There's a lot more hobbyists in jiu-jitsu. So as a pro, as a professional, it's a simple answer. Jiu-jitsu is not a good base for MMA, but combined with other aspects of MMA, like other grappling arts, wrestling, maybe a little judo, maybe even a little bit of sambo, some leg locks, it's a great base, but I would focus most of my effort on wrestling.
The wrestling elements.
Yes.
Even if you're going to use jiu-jitsu as your base, focus on the wrestling elements. If you're going to be a pro fighter or something like that, sure.
The number one thing I would focus on let's just say you're an MMA fighter, you don't have a base of anything, but you're just thinking in your head like, oh, I want to learn jiu-jitsu. Should I be going to an academy to sign up? It depends. If you do, you need to talk to your coach and let him know that you're an MMA fighter, and you got to focus on a couple things. The one thing that is most important is get up off the ground. Okay, you need to dictate where the fight goes. If you can't, then you need to dictate where you want the fight to be if your opponent dictates it for you. Does that make sense? Like if my opponent takes me down.
I would even take it a step further, actually. For me, the approach I always had is try your damnness to not go to the ground if you don't want to get there, and then get up. Yeah.
The thing most of the time that I'll tell people is that if they haven't fought MMA, it's kind of maybe they don't understand. But I've fought a couple times. I don't even remember how I hit the ground. Again, I'm super amateur, but in all the fights that I've had, they've hit the ground. I don't remember how they hit the ground. This is like, I don't think there's even footage of these matches anymore. And I don't remember. I just know that we were on the ground and I was stuffed against a cage. I do remember those details. But yeah, so get off the ground. Secondly, you need to have escapes. Okay, I've seen people stuck on their back. Just, no. Sometimes you mount somebody, the fight's over. They're gonna low level guys. It could end the fight. So you need to have some escapes. You need to be able to get up. You need to have a go-to submission. Okay, I would say whatever you're good. Eddie Bravo does a good job explaining this. Is whatever you gravitate towards, just capture it. If you're really good at heel hooks, make it your thing. If you're really good at Kimura, make it your thing. But don't try to be a jack of all trades.
Right, absolutely.
You're an MMA fighter.
Be focused.
You should have a good rear naked choke. It should always be good. You should have a good secondary attack, like an arm lock or something. You should have the ability to get up. You should have the ability to escape from any, bad positions. And I guess the fifth skill, I would say, is you should have the ability to keep your base. You need to make sure and this is not trained in jiu-jitsu enough, you cannot be getting swept in MMA. All right, this is not jiu-jitsu where you get swept as 2 points. Much of the time in MMA, this is why you don't see that many sweeps in MMA. When you get swept, it's over. You've lost the round. It depends on when, but if somebody has the skill to sweep you, they may have the skills to hold you for the next 3 minutes, and you've lost the round. So that's the final skill I would say is, base on top. Do not get swept. You need to practice your jiu-jitsu in a way where you're just, posting and making sure no matter what, you don't get swept. If you get swept, that's where the getting up comes in. Get up right away. Okay, so yeah, so hopefully we answered that. Is jiu-jitsu a good base for MMA? It can be if you work on the right things, but in its current iteration of how we train it in the gi, my answer would be no. Do you have anything to add, Jim?
No. I think we went over it. And again, remember people, these are broad. These are very broad. We started off the top of the podcast talking about Brian Ortega. Mm-hmm. Dude's one of the best fighters in the world right now with the jiu-jitsu base. So of course, and our lives are committed to.
Yeah, and how did he win? He won
without using
a little bit. But what maybe that helped him. Maybe it was the fear, Korean Zombie's fear of his jiu-jitsu.
And I think that bodes. And we talked about that a little bit last week again.
Brian's an outlier, by the way. I want everybody to know that Brian Ortega is an outlier where somebody is so dangerous off their back that
people will avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the case for most jiu-jitsu people.
No, but I think they set the bar of what you should aspire towards because, again, we talked about Tony Ferguson. No one wants to tangle with him on the ground. No one wants to tangle with him. Fabricio Verdum. No one wants to tangle. Damian Maia. So the list goes on. So they're outliers, but sort of. These are people that are focused and they're doing it right. And look at Gary Tonon's on his way of being that kind of MMA fighter, right? So the point is really commit to it. But generally speaking, I think across the board, you're going to get a lot of jiu-jitsu guys saying the same thing, that wrestling, Joe Rogan, the man himself, has said it many, many times that wrestling is a great base.
The best way to do it, I would say, if people are aspiring to MMA fighters or coaching MMA fighters, go find the best jiu-jitsu based fighters in MMA and emulate, or at least be inspired by what they do. We talk about Maya, Jacare, Ryan Hall, Brian Ortega. Yeah. What are they doing? They're generally not evolving their jiu-jitsu as much.
No, they're shoring up on the other elements.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So disagree with us. I dare you. Comment below. Say something. Let your voice be heard. We are a community that wants to hear what you have to say.
Yes, please tell us why jiu-jitsu is a good base for modern MMA, and we will
discuss this.
We'll discuss it next week.
We will discuss this.
Or we'll discuss another topic.
So, Coach, once again, thanks for your insight. Always get some little nuggets and gems from these conversations. Hope you guys did too.
Yes, please, if you're watching this, to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. And also, please go to CoachBZ.net and subscribe to the RSS feed. Because...
And Coach BZ on Instagram as well. Follow his stories. The dude's always posting stories about strength and conditioning, weight cutting.
I post little things about little nuances that I see in the UFC.
Good stuff.
Nobody report me because I think it's you're not supposed to do that. But
all right,
I'm good.
So we're working on the honor system here. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and hit that like and subscribe, like the coach said. Thanks, Coach. Talk to you guys.
All right.